Good evening, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with the National Weather Service. You're watching Alaska Weather with us on this January the 7th. As always, we encourage you to stay up to date with your local weather situation and your forecast. You can do that easily by calling us at 1-800-472-0391. That is our Alaska Weather Information Line. It's free to use anywhere around Alaska. As always, you can find our information on our website, weather.gov/Alaska, or on your mobile device, mobile.weather.gov. It works a lot better than the big web page on your small phone there. So try that fast-moving connection there. And then when you find your forecast, go ahead and bookmark to that to your home page. It will work just like your favorite weather app. You can always email me anytime. Love to see your weather pictures around your part of Alaska. We'll feature them on the show if you send them in. david.snyder@noaa.gov is how you reach me. Happy to help you with any questions or issues you have with any of our services as best as I'm able. Let's take a look at the winter weather advisories, the warnings, anything going on around Alaska tonight. And mainly, the main issues are winter weather advisories in Southeast that are ending. So for northern parts of Southeast between 3 and 6 o'clock, these advisories will fall away there. We're not expecting to see continued areas of new snow, but it has been snowing quite a bit in northern parts of Southeast thanks to a lot of warm and wet air moving into northern sections of the Panhandle as we head into tonight and into tomorrow. Up across the north and areas across the west, we continue to see wind chill advisories, and that is because just a little bit of wind is moving through a whole lot of cold air, and that little disruption in airflow is making you feel tremendously colder than it actually is outside. But it looks like wind chill values there could be as cold as 45 to 55 below in parts of Southwest and the Denali and Deltana Flats region, as well as areas around Norton Sound. And we also have another section in Southwest that we're watching a little bit. It's not under an advisory at the moment, but certainly could be. Areas from New Stoyhawk and Kaliganek are looking at wind chill values that could be pushing into the minus 50 range there at times. So maybe not as bad as what we'll see up here across the Yukon Valley and around the Deltana and Tannel Flats region, as well as the areas across Norton Sound. But watch for areas here in Southwest. If you get a wind chill advisory, that's why. It looks like that's gotten a little bit worse. Another thing to point out is flooding taking place around the Kenai Peninsula generally. Areas there around I think it's the Willow Bend Campground, looking at flooding. And that's due to ice jam situations there. The Riverside community there in the subdivision, especially seeing some of the ice jam situation really flood and make a lot of those roads impassable. That looks like that's going to continue as we continue to be under this significant cold snap around South Central. So the Big Eddy State Park recreation area certainly suffering the most from that, and the Riverside Drive neighborhood having trouble with that. So again, want to avoid that area if you can, and for those folks that are affected by that, very sorry to hear that, and hopefully conditions will improve for you in the very near future. Up across the Beaufort Seacoast, red areas there indicating a wind chill warning. So you know it's bad if it's a wind chill already, and you know it's bad if it's a wind chill warning. We're talking about areas from Prudhoe Bay and Dead Horse east toward Kaktovik, looking at wind chill values that are pushing 65 below, and that's really exacerbated, made worse by that westerly wind, 15 to 20 miles per hour, blowing through temperatures that are 20 to 30 below easily. So again, wind chill warnings there for the Prudhoe Bay, Dead Horse, all the way out toward Kaktovik and Demarcation Point. That'll take us in through at least parts of Wednesday, so plan on updates there. As we look at the weather picture across the region on this Tuesday, low pressure west of the Aleutians is pushing a front into the central and western Bering, all the way through St. Paul, out across parts of west and southwestern sections of the Aleutians and the Alaska Peninsula. And southeast, still getting some remnant warm and wet air blowing into northern parts of southeast, but of course that's moving through a much colder air mass and creating a decent amount of snow across northern parts of southeast there, so that trend continues. For south central, for the west, the interior, and the north coast, and the eastern interior, all of that is dominated by significant cold high pressure. And of course, one thing to mention too, with this west and southwesterly flow working over the Alaska Peninsula is the Shashalden volcano. As you probably heard, if you're monitoring anything out west or just like to check in on volcanoes from time to time, Shashalden was erupting again today. And ash puffing off of Shashalden was generally moving out over marine areas. So we're not expecting to see any ash across any of our communities. However, it's always important to know that if that is not true and you are in one of the communities like, let's say Cold Bay, Falls Pass, Sandpoint, or upstream, of course, If you do see ash sometime, we love to know, and your report could be the first one we get that helps us know that things are a little bit different than what we're expecting and what we're seeing on the satellite picture. So Southwest Alaska is a long way away, and your reports always help no matter what part of Alaska you're in. So for right now, no reports have been seen, and it is important to know that you can make a report if ash is falling in your community. We love to know. So there you go. Here's a look at the satellite picture out across the west, and another system's coming in across Adak to Shemya. Now, that is still going to work through a large part of west and southwestern Alaska and the western Gulf before it makes any impact into the significant cold across the interior. So the most likely situation is we will develop low pressure here across the Gulf toward the end of the week and start pulling out some of that cold across northern parts of southeast and south central. It will still be cold across the interior, but we're setting up a situation that will start to pull some of that out, lessen the impact of that deep cold across the interior, but also create some drainage winds across some of our gap-prone areas there. So all those places that get windy in the cold winter, we're setting that situation up right now. Here's where we are. For today, a 1,023 millibar high across eastern Siberia, all the way across to northern parts of Canada at 1,032 millibars. Low pressures in the Gulf, and we have this wave working its way across the southern Bering right now. A little bit of light rain across the western Alaska Peninsula, some snow across the Pribilofs, and snow continues across northern parts of southeast. Plenty of ice fog out there. Most of the low areas and the valleys are looking at least some predicament there of low clouds, maybe ice fog. We saw some of that around south central earlier this morning. No way to say that it probably won't be there tomorrow. It looks like we're back in the same setup again, so don't be surprised to run into that if you're driving up and down the parks, around the Sterling, perhaps around the Glen Highway. You'll run into that, especially in passes there. And for passes themselves, wind chills will be worse. Broad Pass, Thompson Pass looking at wind chill advisories at least as we go into the next 24 hours. Maybe some brief snow showers there, but nothing too significant. Across the southeastern coast, it does look like a better chance for some light snow as we head through tonight. And with a 963 millibar low out west, that'll deepen a little bit more tonight. A better chance for rain and snow across parts of the Aleutians. You'll get into a little bit more of a southerly flow north of St. Matthew. And of course, that has some impacts on the ice edge there. It doesn't look like it will have a big impact this time around, but it's something we're watching. It looks like a little bit more of an offshore flow for right now as we get into Wednesday, and with significant cold there, that ice will continue to grow, but it probably won't move as far south as quickly as it has in recent days. With low pressure out west moving northward, we see that rain and snow line inching closer and closer to St. Paul and St. George. Low pressure continues to sit across the north and eastern Gulf Coast. That's around 1,007 millibars. And notice that tight pressure packing across the Copper River Valley. This is one signal we're watching now to say, yeah, there could be some drainage winds out of the Copper River Delta, out around the northern Lynn Canal areas and our gap-prone areas all the way up into Yakutat. So, again, if you're in a windy spot, it might be time to think about what you need to do if you have preparations to make when the wind starts to come up. Watch for ice fog across the interior and probably again across parts of south central as we go. For Thursday, low pressures building into the Gulf there. More widespread precipitations expected to reach into southern parts of southeast, probably Kodiak Island with a better chance of snow toward the end of the week, and snow showers across southwest. All of this means temperatures are coming up in your location because the moisture is coming up, and that deep, deep cold should not be as intense across coastal areas. Across the interior, high pressure systems building in. 1,039 millibars means it's bigger, tougher, and harder to bluffer. So sitting across the Yukon there is going to be a big deal, and it's going to be cold across the interior. Here's some of those temperatures getting into Wednesday morning. Anywhere from 40 to 50 below across the middle Tanana Valley up to Fort Yukon. 25 to maybe 40 below across the central and eastern Beaufort Seacoast. North Sound temperatures 15 to 25, including Nome, 23 above in St. Paul and St. George, 30s for the Alaska Peninsula out toward the chain. South Central 10 to 20 below. Prince William Sound single digits there. Southeast looking at temps in the teens and 20s. Highs there in the 20s and 30s tomorrow. Teens and 20s for South Central. Cook Inlet looking at single digit temps and 32 below in Fairbanks and 42 below in Fort Yukon. Stay warm.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
And back with your aviation update now. IFR concerns will linger across the Arctic coast there and into parts of the North Slope, but generally north of most of your Brooks Range passes. You'll see generally VFR conditions all the way down the west coast through the Noatak, Kobuk valleys, and into parts of southwest. You don't really pick up into any MVFR or IFR concerns until you get into the Alaska Peninsula and further west into the Aleutians. St. Paul and St. George likely starting low for your Wednesday morning with IFR concerns there. Another concern to keep watch on is not a significant threat at the moment. moment, but Shishaldin has been erupting. There is ash that is leaving the volcano area, but it's traveling mainly out over marine areas and not over any communities at this point. But for further updates, make sure you're tracking the Alaska Aviation Weather Unit's web page there and any alerts that you see from the National Weather Service. Across the northern Gulf, IFR mainly stays out over the open water, but Chilkoot and White Pass in areas generally north of Juneau and in through the Lynn Canal will likely start out with IFR. And you're going to see some low-level moisture hovering around Cook Inlet all the way up through Tenita Pass and eastward up through the Copper River Valley. A lot of that is going to be ice fog, most likely in the morning with the cold weather. As we get into the afternoon, marginal concerns will stretch out across a large part of southeast. You're going to see generally VFR conditions across Prince William Sound through the Barren Islands and into Shelikof Strait, and most of Kodiak Island looks pretty good. But as low pressure moves into the southern Bering, you'll see a broad area of IFR wrapping around that low pressure system from St. Matthew all the way through the Pribs and down through the Alaska Peninsula. Generally VFR across the Brooks Range west and southwest, and then again we get back into south central with ice fog concerns. That sticks around through Thursday morning. Also generally from Denali, McKinley regions and west through McGrath. Then you get back into VFR across the west coast. The southwestern Cape's dealing with IFR in the morning. Windward sides of the Alaska Peninsula also picking up more IFR. A little bit of a break in the northern parts of southeast. IFR is starting to stretch back in from the south across the Dixon entrance, and a little bit of improvement across the north slope as we get into the afternoon. That continues to improve through Kaktovik, Prudhoe Bay, and Deadhorse by Thursday late. And then IFR breaking up a little bit as the front starts to fall apart across parts of the central and northern sections of the Bering. We're still dealing with heavy IFR across the Alaska Peninsula and still looking at patchy areas of marginal concerns, but a little bit increase of marginal weather there across Prince William Sound and areas around Resurrection Bay and Seward. On to your specific pass concerns there. Anaktuvik and Adigan Pass look pretty good as we get into your Wednesday. As we get to Lake Clark and Merrill Pass, we'll start to see some changes maybe late in the day. A little bit more likely, though, as you run into Rainy Pass, heading over into marginal concerns by late in the afternoon. Windy Pass at this point looks to be marginal as we get into Wednesday afternoon. Same trends for Isabel Pass as we go through Wednesday. Mentasta Pass at this point. Again, your main concerns are going to be ice fog and low-level moisture there. Everything high up looks pretty good at this point. And Tenita Pass looking to be marginal most of the day. Portage Pass, most of your concerns are going to be right there along Turnagain Arm and then northward into the Anchorage Bowl area. Anything on the east side for tomorrow in Prince William Sound looks to be VFR. And then Chilkoot and White Pass, again, look to be low as we start up Wednesday, and some improvements are expected as we go. Freezing levels, obviously most of the state right now is below freezing in the morning, so there's your surface freezing line stretching all the way out toward Sandpoint and west to about Acatan, and then generally south of the capital city through Sitka and into Ketchikan and the Dixon entrance. We do see some warmer weather coming in aloft from the central and eastern chain, about 2,000 to 4,000 foot levels there showing up on the freezing level chart there as we get through your Wednesday morning. Icing concerns are generally limited, but we're mostly going to focus on areas around the coast. Some isolated moderate showing up across a large part of southeast. More significant concerns probably just outside of Yakutat and west of Sitka, and generally offshore and into the Gulf there. And you'll notice a little bit of a limitation there for the levels there south of Ketchikan, below 8,000 and above 3,000. So just a specific layer there. Out across the west, above 5,000 for the Pribilofs and above 7 for parts of the Alaska Peninsula. The jet stream right now has high pressure sitting across the Gulf. Some broad areas of low pressure across the west. Mainly that cold air dome across the north is really controlling most of our weather at this point. And you can see that showing up here at 9,000 feet. Northeasterlies over the interior, strong southerly flow across the Bering, and low pressures cranking up across the west. That may start to push this high pressure system further east as we get in through the rest of the week. In the meantime, at lower levels, 3,000 feet, low pressure sitting across the Gulf right now, steering in westerlies for the Gulf, light winds across most of northeast. The primary concern, though, for low-level aviation especially, is going to be outflow winds, I think, and that'll show up across the northern Gulf, places like the Copper River Valley and the Delta, around Yakutat, and probably some areas around the Taku Valley there and northern sections of southeast. So keep watch on that, and changes will be coming. Below 5,000 feet, watch for considerable moderate across the coast. Hello again, I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with the National Weather Service for another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. And joining us again, talking about the augmented reality sandbox, is Eric Stevens from GINA, the Geographic Information Network of Alaska. And he's actually talking about a project from AKwx, which is the experimental program to stimulate competitive research. A lot of acronyms, but some really fun stuff today, right, Eric?
You bet. We've got a learning tool that is a tool that's fun to use, and it really has a relevance to actually daily lives of anyone who goes outside and sees lumpy topography in Alaska. We've got a lot of mountains and such. You know, when I was younger and go on your first hike in the hills, say, you're given, maybe you're in the Boy Scouts or you get at the kiosk at the trailhead, a topographic map, a flat piece of paper with all these lines on it, bullseyes, long lines that curve back on themselves, say, perhaps things that look like this, a quadrangle or a topographic map. We've got here just to illustrate a couple of examples near Denali. Alaska has so much topography, so many mountains. And what are all these lines that we see? It can be tough to know what this means the first time you look at it. What we've got, all these lines represent lines of where the elevation of the topography goes through a certain level above sea level, say that this line represents where the mountains have gone from below 1,000 feet, mean sea level, up through 1,000 feet and above. That's your 1,000-foot contour. And when the mountain keeps going up, you're up to 1,200 feet, 1,400 feet, and so on. And that's how you get this little bullseye around the peak of a mountain.
Kind of makes layered slices, right?
Kind of like layered slices. Nice way to look at that. And when you see the lines are closer together, you're going up more steeply. If the mountain rises more slowly, it takes you longer in horizontal space to go through those different vertical increments. So
that is really hard to visualize.
Right. Imagine you're looking at a 2D piece of paper, two-dimensional piece of paper, but you're trying to understand what the three-dimensional world looks like. Well, enter the augmented reality sandbox. Yes, what is that? It is right here. We have the sandbox with us today, Sandbox 2.0, portable version. Built up at University of Alaska Fairbanks. And we've got a couple of folks helping out today.
Let's see, Alana Valaji, and she's a mechanical engineering student from the University of Alaska Fairbanks. If you want to give us a thumbs up there, Alana, thanks for helping us out today. And Courtney Breest, she's the outreach coordinator from AKwx, also helping us out today. Thanks, Courtney.
And this tool here has a Microsoft Kinect to sense the level of sand in this sandbox. And then the Kinect feeds its information into a computer that then sends a signal to a projector to draw the appropriate topographic lines on this topography. The fun thing about this, as we can see here, is that the sandbox and its Kinect and its projector, they all work as a team. So here we've got a mountain in the middle of the sandbox. What if we took down the mountain to some degree? Watch as the software responds and redraws the topography.
Kind of a caldera forming there.
There you go, And what's fun about the sandbox too is it knows that gravity flows downhill, and we've got some water that's actually down in the lowest elevations. And what's happening now is we're making it rain a little bit. We'll fill up rain into that elevated lake bed, that caldera, as you said. And so now water is pooled up there. And what if you gouged out an outlet channel?
Glacial dam release.
There you go. The water flows out. What we're seeing here is a tool that allows people to touch and connect, Microsoft Connect, RRR, to connect two-dimensional topographic maps like what we have here, these flat things on a piece of paper, to the real three-dimensional world. I think this sandbox's real particular application as a learning tool to young people is, what does a two-dimensional map mean when it's trying to represent the three-dimensional world? This sandbox is kind of both at once. It's actually three-dimensional, lumpy topography there, the sand, but it's got these lines drawn on the three-dimensional sand that would be on a two-dimensional piece of paper.
Wow, that is a huge leap from the learning that we experienced when we were younger to how children and even adults are visualizing in these new forms of technology. It allows that to kind of reshape their thinking and visualize this in a very useful and absolutely hands-on way. It's amazing.
It's a hands-on tool, and
it's hard for me to sit here and not go play with that.
Well, that's what happened at GINA, up at the University of Alaska in Fairbanks, when the first model was being made, the prototype with plywood and such. We had professional adult professor types had heard about this, and they came by because they wanted to see how it worked.
Okay.
And everyone becomes that idealistic, wonder-filled youngster.
Sure.
And you just can't help but play with that, and to see how it reacts in time, and
Right.
it's a dynamic learning tool, and it
Dynamic,
responds.
That's exactly the word.
And
Yeah.
you wonder what applicabilities beyond a teaching
Right.
tool for
Where does it
topography
go?
can it have? You can see how in Alaska we have inundation mapping is an issue. If you had water slosh inland, say in a coastal flooding event
Right.
on the western coast of Alaska or the Arctic coast, you could see this. The concept is illustrated here as an introductory learning method. I think this is a potentially good outreach tool for all of us in Alaska.
Okay, so not only just a topographical sense, a mapping sense, maybe something that leads into understanding of how geographic information systems work, the GIS, but also geology, if we wanted to get into kind of the formations and the bigger land masses and the representation of the 2D map. We could go into hydrology, which is very important in Alaska, of course. And even just understanding the weather sense. Mounding up a big pile of sand could be that Arctic high pressure system sitting on top of Fairbanks, and the voids would be low pressure systems. This can go a lot of different directions.
Yes, exactly. It's not just landforms, but pressure has contours of high pressure and low pressure. And I wish I had had this kind of a learning tool when I was taking
kidding.
Meteorology 101 back 25 years ago.
wow.
Would have been helpful, I think.
Probably would have gotten a better grade, yeah. Okay, thank you so much for coming by, Eric, and Alana and Courtney, thank you so much for your help there in the sandbox. We are going to play in the sandbox a little bit more coming up tomorrow on our next edition of Alaska Weather Facts. We hope you join us for that. In the meantime, make sure you go to alaska.edu/EPSCOR. That's alaska.edu. EPSCOR to learn more information about what we're doing with this augmented reality sandbox around Alaska. We'll see you next time on Alaska Weather Facts.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
And back with a look at your marine ice and weather now. And as you see here, as of today, we're really zoomed in here on Bristol Bay, Nunivak Island, and St. Lawrence Island, St. Matthew, St. Paul, and St. George, all in view. The ice edge is very close to St. Matthew. In fact, there's some newer ice on the south side there. One thing that we're telling our fisher and crabbing friends out here is that the ice edge is growing southward still in this weather pattern. However, it's not advancing on its own just because of the weather currents as much in the next couple days because of low pressure coming up across the western Bering. That southerly wind will kind of slow that down a little bit. So it's still growing, but it's not advancing quickly. So probably not a whole lot more additional movement southward in the next couple days. Now, the other thing the Alaska Sea Ice Program folks want me to tell you is that if you see that's not true, let us know. They appreciate your reports and they're happy to help. If you need some information there, if you're out there close to the ice edge and working that, be safe and let us know what you see because that helps us do a better job forecasting and passing on information like this. You can check that anytime, weather.gov/Anchorage/ice. On to southeast now. Winds will be picking up out of the north for Lynn Canal, 35 knots, 6-foot seas there, southeasterlies in the Dixon Entrance and Clarence Strait. Look for onshore flow to develop across the outer coast. Gusts up to 35 knots coming out of the northern passages there and into places like Gustavus and the outer coast. 9-foot seas all the way down the outer coast there for Wednesday. For Thursday, offshore flow develops quickly. Look for a 25 to 30 knot wind, 9 to 10-foot seas in the outer coast areas. Northerlies coming down through the Lynn Canal and Stevens Passage. Southeasterlies through the Clarence Strait region, 15 knots and 4-foot seas, and easterlies across the northern Gulf. For South Central, again, gusts in the gap areas are expected, especially through places around Valdez, through the Copper River Delta. Gust to 45 here. You can see that shaping up right there in the colors. 25 knots otherwise. 6-foot seas, 6 to 7-foot seas down through the Barrens and northeasterlies coming down through the Lynn Canal. 10 to 20 knots with 2 to 6-foot seas expected. That picks up on Thursday. 30-knot winds there out of Resurrection Bay and across the western Barrens. Easterlies coming into the eastern Barrens, and look for a northerly flow to diminish a little bit inside of Prince William Sound, but still holding onto those small crafts across the northern Gulf, 30 to 35 with 9-foot seas on Thursday. For Bristol Bay, look for northeasterlies at 34-foot seas there. That really picks up sharply as it runs into the front as you head down the coast. 30 knots there with a 9-foot sea north of Cold Bay. East and southeasterlies across the North Pacific waters there with an 8 to 11 foot sea. Northeasterlies strong inside of Shelikof Strait with 5 foot seas on a 20-knot wind. Coming up even more on Thursday to 35 knots, 40 knots on the eastern side of the island with 16 foot seas. 10 foot seas from the west with westerlies there at 30 knots. Southerlies across the Bering Sea coast waters at 25. And again, you can see the ice edge here. Northeasterlies over the ice-free waters, though, will bring us 4 foot seas on that 30-knot wind. For the Aleutians, a broad southerly flow behind the front. Look for easterlies out in the western chain at 35 knots, but otherwise 8 to 14 foot seas expected there on the Bering Sea coast side, 12 to 15 foot seas on the Pacific side. As we get into Thursday, southwesterlies pull in. Again, the low pressure system is moving north and east with the front working its way east and north. Look for 30 to 35 knots there with 18 to 27 foot seas across the Pacific. Through the gaps, you'll see higher winds and seas, of course, 13 to 14 foot seas, even 16 foot seas across the Bering, and south and westerlies across the west end at 30 to 35, 15 to 23 foot seas in the west. For Wednesday, across the west coast, ice is in place for most areas of the Norton Sound, St. Lawrence Island, all the way down to the southwest coast and around Nunivak Island there. Look for north and easterly winds, 20 to 35 knots there across the region. Easterlies and open waters there around St. Matthew, I mean 17 foot seas there on that 40-knot wind. Easterlies at 35, 13 foot seas for St. Paul and St. George. For Thursday, north and easterly winds down the west coast, 25 to 30. Look for 35 knots and 17 foot seas for St. Matthew. Southerlies at 20 with a 9 foot sea around St. Paul and St. George. And over the ice in the north, it's cold. Look for a 5 to 15 knot wind across the central and eastern Beaufort Sea coast. And once again, wind chill warnings in effect for your area there. South and easterly winds for the Chukchi, 10 knots. And again, still very cold. No warnings right now. 10 to 25 knots out of Kotzebue Sound for the Chukchi coast on Thursday, and westerlies continue at 10 to 15 across the Beaufort, again with wind chill warnings possible again. Tonight's forecast keeps snow showers across a large part of southeast. The northern areas will see those winter weather advisories expire after anywhere from 6 to about 11 inches of snow in many cases. Flurries and ice fog across the north slope and through the interior. Watch for broad areas of ice fog. Low pressure building in across the west and southwestern chain starts to move northward into that cold high pressure. We'll see the winds pick up and watch for gap winds to develop across south central and southeast as we go, as temperatures nudge upward just a little bit. The big news, though, will remain the big cold.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.